When I stepped into the 19th floor conference room at Bright Forge, I expected a quiet handshake, maybe a ceremonial signature and a modest acknowledgement of the 14 years I had just etched into silicon and syntax. The glass walls gleamed, catching the morning sun, and the table was already set, folders, neatly stacked coffee still steaming. It felt staged, but I told myself it was just corporate formality. Clayton Reddick stood near the far window phone in hand posture sharp. He looked up when I entered, smiled that deliberate kind of smile that never touches the eyes. "Surrealist," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Thanks for making time." I sat careful to align my bag beneath the chair, as I always did. Habit, discipline, control. I'll get to it quickly. He continued, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Effective immediately, your position is being dissolved. Strategic realignment." My gaze dropped to the page. It was all there. Boilerplate phrases, severance breakdowns, intellectual property reminders. Typed cleanly at the bottom, "Surrealist Morrow Senior Systems Architect, terminated." I didn't speak, didn't blink. My thumb pressed against the side of my chair just to feel something grounded. Clayton kept talking something about gratitude and policy, but his voice faded behind the static in my own mind. They didn't even let me finish a cup of coffee. When I stood, the legs of the chair scraped against the floor too loudly. I nodded once, stiff, automatic, and left without shaking his hand. The hallway outside was sterile and silent. I passed no one. At the elevator, I pressed the button twice, though once was enough. The doors opened. I walked in, down 20 floors and out into the cool San Francisco air. It wasn't until I was in my car engine off key, still in hand, that I opened my laptop. One click into the patent submission portal. The file was there. Same structure, same logic trees, same runtime notation. But the author field read Bright Forge Consortium. No mention of me, no trace, no name, only the timestamp 4 hours after mine had been finalized. And right then, I stopped feeling surprised and started remembering Zurich. 9 months before the folder slid across that glass table, I walked through the soft drizzle of Zurich's old town coat collar, turned up conference badge swinging against my chest. Officially, I was attending the International Summit on Sustainable Infrastructure. Unofficially, I was building my escape. The conference happened. Yes, panels, lanyards, weak coffee. But in between sessions, I took side streets instead of shuttles. I met with a lawyer I trusted more than any colleague, a friend from my law school days, who now specialized in intellectual property structuring, for inventors too smart to wait until it was too late. His office sat above a quiet bakery on Dufourstrasse. He poured the coffee himself. I signed the founding papers of Alaris Infrastructure Ltd. in that room using a black pen with fading ink. We attached every file, every signature, every clause, Swiss YPO registration timestamped, declarations, biometric author logs. I remember the clause number because I chose it 12.4. It read, should the originator be removed from authorship under unethical conditions, all dependent licenses may be revoked without delay or appeal. At the time, it felt like overkill. Now it felt prophetic. Bright Forge never saw the full algorithm. They got what they asked for, an integration shell, clean, functional, efficient. It could run their smart grid pilot and scale it fast. What they didn't realize was that the deeper logic, the adaptive layers, the long-term load balancing functions, they all sat behind an external call authentication protocol, one they didn't control. I told them I was simplifying the framework to avoid runtime latency. They hadn't looked further. They never do when things work. In the months that followed, I kept the deeper version under Thornshield, a subdivision of Alaris. Quiet, encrypted, compartmentalized, just in case. I didn't know what betrayal would look like, but I knew it would come dressed in a tailored suit and use words like strategy and realignment. So I wrote the language that would survive it. And while they were scaling, pitching, expanding, I was wiring the switches underneath. I never planned to build a network. At first, it was just a Defense One license to a wind optimization lab in Manitoba that wanted more freedom than Bright Forge allowed. Then a solar logistics firm in Vietnam that needed scalable infrastructure, but refused to be tethered to U.S. monopolies. Then a desalination AI team in Valparaiso. Each deal started with the same question: can we trust you more than them? Through Alaris, I structured each license personally. No middlemen, no outsourced attorneys. Just me, a locked terminal, and the language I knew how to wield better than any boardroom executive. Each contract contained a clause I wrote by hand, 11.2. If the original author is removed, erased, or misattributed without legal justification, this agreement terminates immediately and irreversibly. Most of them didn't even ask why it was there. They had seen others be erased too. By the time Bright Forge took my name off the record, 48 separate companies were running my code. Some in pieces, some in full. Smart grids in Denmark. Railway load prediction in New South Wales. Even rural hospitals in northern Kenya. And all of them were tied to a live license monitoring dashboard I built myself. Green meant active. Yellow meant near expiration. Red meant revoked. Bright Forge appeared near the bottom. License ID W73 labeled internal pilot. 6 months. I remember the day they signed it. Their legal counsel skimmed it, asked if pilot status implied a discount. I said yes. They never asked what pilot also implied, that the access wasn't permanent. No one ever questions a trial if it works. While they held launch parties and pitched investors with my architecture as their backbone, I sat at my desk each night and watched the dashboard pulse, slow, steady, alive. I wasn't waiting for collapse. I was designing it. And when it came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be clean, executable, logged in triplicate. I minimized the window and opened my encrypted inbox. The first flag had just arrived. 7 days after the folder, I received a message from an address I didn't recognize. No subject. No greeting. Just a file attached with a single note. You didn't get this from me. The sender was Rowan Beltran, a junior paralegal I barely remembered from my time at Bright Forge. Always quiet. Always watching. He used to bring 2 pens to every meeting and never lost either. I downloaded the file, opened it. A boardroom recording, crackling audio, familiar voices. Clayton's voice, polished and confident, came through clear. The optics are clean. She's gone. File it under Bright Forge and move forward. If she speaks up, bury her in paperwork. No anger rose in me. Not yet. What clenched in my throat wasn't betrayal, it was confirmation. They knew. He knew. And they'd done it anyway. That evening, I received a second blow. Elena Matsuoka, COO of Maria Grid Solutions in Tokyo. One of my earliest partners called directly. Her voice was tight professional. Bright Forge contacted us, she said, claimed Alaris was never real, that you forfeited your rights. They're offering us a new license 10 times the original fee, effective immediately. I stood still in the middle of my living room phone pressed to my ear. That's false, I said quietly. I thought so, she replied. But they threatened to suspend service if we don't comply by Friday. They weren't just stealing anymore. They were turning my invention into leverage, shaking down the companies who had trusted me, who had trusted ethics over scale. I thanked her, hung up, sat down. Then I pulled up the dashboard. 48 partners still green. But Bright Forge W73 was flashing yellow. A warning had triggered. Unauthorized claim of authorship. Clause 11.2 had been breached. I hovered my cursor over the log field and opened the audit chain. Time-stamped, logged, signed. Everything I needed was there. I didn't feel fury. I felt alignment. The blueprint had held. And now the system had just begun to bite. The city outside was quiet. I could hear the distant low churn of buses rolling over wet asphalt, the occasional hiss of a crosswalk signal. Inside my apartment was darker than usual. I hadn't bothered turning on the main lights, just the screen in front of me, the soft blue glow of the Alaris dashboard blinking in perfect rhythm. 48 partners, all green. License ID W73 flagged. The violation read clearly, unethical author reassignment detected. I reached for the encrypted drive labeled fail-safe protocols, plugged it in, and watched the folders unfold like a map I'd drawn months ago for a destination I hoped I'd never have to reach. Each file a marker of preparation, each document a tether to truth. I uploaded the notarized Zurich IP filings first, then the original submission logs from the U.S. patent portal, my version, then theirs. Rowan's recording followed. I added every signed agreement with each partner clause 11.2 highlighted in red. A full digital paper trail cross-referenced and time-stamped. The system prompted me once upload complete, documents verified. And then there it was, the red button. Revoke all. I didn't click. Not yet. My hand hovered steady but waited as if the weight of 112,000 employees and 2.1 million households sat in my palm. Because in some ways they did. I thought of the girl in Nairobi, 12 years old, who told a reporter she could study at night now because of a solar grid, powered by a smart system from somewhere far away. I thought of the water filters running in rural Chile, built on my adaptive load balance models. I thought of the boardroom of Clayton's voice saying I was gone, of how easily they rewrote my absence as an opportunity. Then I heard it again, my mother's voice. Build something they can't ignore even if they try. At 11:37 p.m., I opened the system console. I didn't press the button, but I opened the queue, and I loaded the sequence, and I set the clock. At 3:29 p.m. Eastern, I watched the final audit check pass. Each license verified, each clause cross-matched, each timestamp locked. The system ran a last sweep, all green except one. At 3:30 p.m., I clicked. The dashboard shimmered once, then went still. One by one, rows began to flash. Revoked. Madrid, Singapore, Sao Paulo, Berlin, then Brightforge. Their flag turned red with a priority status override. That wasn't me. That was the system itself. The auto-escalation protocol kicked in for highest severity breaches. Unauthorized authorship, falsified assignment, unethical originator removal, all three triggered at once. Inside their data center, the impact hit hard. Through an old admin access node, one I hadn't technically had since my last month as infrastructure lead, I saw the feed flicker to life. Rows of blinking LEDs shut off in waves. HVAC sensors rebooted to factory defaults. Scheduling engines failed authentication. For a second, no one moved. Then chaos. Tech scrambled some shouting into headsets, others hammering keys with rising panic. One engineer tripped pulling cables. A laptop hit the floor. At the center of it, Clayton Reddick stood frozen, jaw clenched, hands open, watching everything fall silent. And I sat still in my apartment, the glow of the dashboard soft against my skin. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I breathed. My inbox lit up in pulses. Zurich, Tokyo, Quebec City. We understand the situation. Please advise reinstatement procedure. We support your authorship and await guidance. Respectfully requesting path forward. Not one demand. Not one denial. Only acknowledgement. No one argued what had just happened. They had always known the system didn't belong to Brightforge. They just waited to see if I'd fight for it. I opened the new inquiry tab and began tagging requests for prioritization. Then I received an encrypted message from Alaris Legal. Subject urgent request for purchase. Thorncore algorithm. The message came just past midnight, routed through Alaris Legal's secure relay. High priority. Signed by Rassan Al-Dahir, Deputy Director of Strategic Acquisitions at Al Rayon Technologies, UAE. Clean headers, full encryption, no hesitation in tone. They weren't asking for licensing terms. They wanted to buy at everything. $3.5 billion all cash, immediate transfer. exclusive rights. It was the kind of offer designed to silence resistance, the kind people say yes to even when their conscience twitches. On paper, it solved everything. No lawsuits, no negotiations. Just walk away richer than most nations' education budgets. I stared at the number for a long time. Then I reread the line beneath it. With us, your technology will be protected, never diluted, never stolen. You've proven your leverage. Let us amplify it. My hand hovered over the keyboard. It wasn't greed holding me back. It was memory. The first time I ran that algorithm wasn't for profit. It was to keep a pediatric ward in Detroit from losing power during a rolling blackout. The code pulsed like muscle-responsive, balanced human, and it worked. The hospital stayed lit. No child missed a breath. I hadn't written that algorithm to get rich. I'd written it to matter. I replied simply, I didn't build this to be bought. I built it so no one else would be stolen from. 10 minutes later, his response came through. Then you've already won. But if you ever change your mind, the door remains open. I closed the tab, exhaled slowly, and minimized the window. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual, but not oppressive, earned. I wasn't chasing headlines. I was rebuilding rules. And before the sun rose, one more message waited for me, marked urgent, flagged internal. From Clayton Reddick, subject line. We need to talk. Clayton called just after 7. No assistant, no buffer, just his voice, brittle, rehearsed. Calm, layered over panic. Surrealist, he began. I think we can both agree things got out of hand. I didn't answer. Let him fill the silence. We're prepared to offer full reinstatement. CTO title, retroactive equity. A public statement recognizing your role personally, signed by me. Let's fix this together. I let the words hang there, studied their shape. They weren't an apology. They were containment. You didn't just erase my name, Clayton, I said. You tried to bury my future. He sighed. I get it. You're angry. But the IPO is still salvageable. We bring you in officially, settle the narrative. You get your recognition, we get continuity. It's clean. No, I said. He scoffed. Come on, Surrealist. Everyone has a price. I closed my eyes. He still didn't get it. Still thought this was about negotiation, about leverage. I'm not for sale, I said evenly. But your illusion is. There was a beat of silence before he spoke again. Quieter, meaner. You'll tank everything. Your name will be tied to the destruction of hundreds of contracts. I didn't write the clauses, Clayton. I enforced them. I ended the call. Not abruptly, not with drama, just a click, clean and final. Then I opened a blank document and began to write. Open access release for the dignified use of innovation. I drafted the principles clearly, non-exclusivity. No ownership claims a requirement to honor originators by name. The algorithm would be made available to governments, nonprofits, researchers, and builders who pledged to protect the integrity of ideas. It wasn't a press release. It was a line in the sand. By the time I attached the legal packet, I knew I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. I just needed to hit send. But before I did, another message landed in my inbox from an address I hadn't seen in years. Clara Reddick. Subject line. You didn't destroy him, but you saved the rest of us. I never imagined I'd return to Detroit for anything permanent. But when the time came to choose a home for what Alaris would become, it was the only place that made sense. The city knew how to rebuild from ruins. It understood erasure. It understood reinvention. We repurposed an old manufacturing space on the east side, high ceilings, steel beams still stained with decades of effort. It became the Erlin Center, named for my mother, whose belief in quiet persistence had shaped everything I'd ever built. There were no CEO offices, no investor decks, no marble, no patents filed under individual names. Every project, every submission was communal. A clean line in our charter made it simple. Recognition is a right, not a reward. We credited everyone, coders, interns, security staff. The person who brewed the coffee that fueled late-night sprints. Everyone who touched a tool, who caught a bug, who swept the floor while a build compiled, listed, remembered. One afternoon during a community open lab, I sat quietly in the back as a group of students from a local high school tested an open-source version of ThornCore. One girl, thin, sharp-eyed, all elbows and determination, opened her laptop and linked a basic solar input model to our load-balancing framework. When the lights flicked on, she grinned wide and said to her friend, "This is the first time it felt like someone built tech for people like me." I said nothing. She didn't know who I was, and I didn't need her to. That was the whole point. It wasn't my name that mattered. It was that she had space, tools, permission. The real legacy wasn't the algorithm, it was the freedom that surrounded it now. When I left the lab that evening, the sun was sliding behind the old auto-line towers, painting long shadows on the street. On my desk in the office, an envelope weighted no logo, just my name written in a careful, deliberate hand. Inside a single page. Dear Ms. Morrow, my name is Clara Reddick, and I wanted to say thank you for everything you've made possible. The letter was written on unlined cream paper, folded crisply in thirds, the ink just barely smudged in the corner where a hand might have hesitated. It had no logo, no postmark that told me where it came from, only my name written carefully in blue ink on the front. Inside, the handwriting was steady. No loops of apology, no overwritten words. Dear Ms. Morrow. You don't know me, and I don't expect you to answer. But I needed to write this. My name is Clara Reddick. I'm Clayton's daughter. What you didn't ruin my father. He ruined himself. But what you did gave people like me, girls who build things in the background, a way to believe that justice is still possible, even when power says it isn't. Thank you for not staying quiet. Thank you for showing us we don't have to. I read it twice, then folded it gently and slid it into the top drawer of my desk next to a faded photograph of my mother and the blue scarf she knitted during chemo. She never met Clara, but she would have understood the weight of that letter. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked in a blank headline field waiting, and I wrote, "Innovation is not property. Ethics is not a brand. This algorithm belongs to everyone who respects its origin." There were no bullet points, no quotes, no footnotes, just the truth delivered plainly. I clicked send. It didn't trend. No headline flashed. No alert lit up on anyone's feed. But I knew what I'd done. I hadn't ended a company. I hadn't dethroned a man. I had changed the default. I closed the laptop and looked out across the lab floor. A group of students stood around a table arguing over solar routing protocols and laughing in the gaps. One of them had drawn a sketch of the ThornCore layout on a whiteboard, added notes in purple marker. They didn't know who I was, and that was exactly right. I turned off the lights in my office and stepped out into the hallway as the hum of new ideas began to fill the room behind me.